The war had ended, but the wounds it left behind were deep and silent. Eddard Stark rode through the gates of Winterfell with a newborn wrapped tightly in his arms. His face was hard, his eyes more distant than ever. The snow crunched under his horse's hooves as he approached the great hall, where Catelyn waited tired, lonely, and uncertain about the man who had left her just after their wedding. When she saw the child in his arms, her breath caught. The silence between them was sharp, almost violent. "A boy," Ned said simply. Catelyn's eyes moved from her husband's face to the baby. She saw the dark hair, the Targaryen features still, soft and forming. But all she could think was, "Who is this child, and why does he carry your silence? I named him Jon." She stepped back slightly, arms folded tightly across her chest. "Yours?" Her voice cracked, more from fear than anger. Ned looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time since before the war. The cold wind that crept through Winterfell's stone walls couldn't touch the chill between them now. "No," he said finally, "he's not mine." Her brow furrowed, her eyes narrowed with confusion and pain. "Then whose is he, Ned?" There was a long pause. Then he motioned for her to sit, and sat down beside her with the baby in his arms. The fire in the hearth flickered, but it felt like the only warmth left in the room. "He's Lyanna's, my sister's. Her dying wish was that I protect him." Catelyn blinked. "Lyanna. But then who is the father?" Ned hesitated. He had sworn to keep the secret, sworn it with the weight of his sister's final breath in his ears. But he had also sworn to protect his family, and Catelyn was his family. She deserved the truth. The lies would only eat them from the inside out. "Rhaegar Targaryen," he said, almost in a whisper. They were married. It wasn't what Robert believed. She loved him, Cat. Catelyn stared at him, eyes wide with disbelief. "So the boy is a Targaryen, a prince?" "Yes," Ned said. "If Robert finds out, he'll kill him. That's why I told the world he was mine. A dishonor to my name, but a shield for his life." She looked away, lips trembling. Her thoughts scattered like snow in a storm. All those years she'd prepared to be the Lady of Winter. All the dreams she'd made about her family suddenly changed by a baby who carried both ice and fire in his blood. She looked at the boy again. He was quiet now, eyes barely open, so small, so innocent, yet dangerous in his very existence. "So what do we do?" she asked. Her voice was soft now, not filled with rage, but fear. A kind of fear only a mother understands, the fear of a child hunted by a world too cruel for truth. "We raise him," Ned said, "as our own. But you'll know who he is. You won't have to hate him." Catelyn flinched at those words. "You won't have to hate him," as if that had been the plan. "I never wanted to hate a child, Ned. But a lie forces the heart into ugly shapes." He nodded slowly, the guilt written across his face like a scar. "I know, that's why I'm telling you now, before the lie grows roots." Catelyn stood and walked to the window, snowflakes clinging to the outside glass. The north was quiet tonight, but she could feel storms far away gathering beyond the horizon. "If you had died in battle," she whispered, "I would have raised him as your bastard, hated him with quiet eyes and sharp words. But now, I see, he didn't choose this, neither did I." She turned back to him. "But I will protect him, Ned, because he's yours. Not of your blood, maybe, but of your honor." A tear escaped from Ned's eye. He rarely cried, but tonight his sister's ghost felt closer than ever. Catelyn walked over and gently took the child from him. Jon Snow, a name that would hide a legacy. He'll live, she said, but we will have to live with the truth too. And just like that, a new pact was formed. Not of war or politics, but of truth, buried in Winterfell's snow-covered walls. Years passed in Winterfell, and the snow came and went, as always. Jon Snow grew under the watchful eyes of Lord Eddard Stark and Lady Catelyn. But something in the way Catelyn looked at him had changed. She didn't flinch when he entered the room. She didn't pull Robb away from him when they played. There was still a distance, of coarser caution, but it was no longer sharpened by bitterness. Jon, however, could feel that he was different. Even as a boy of 8, he noticed things. The way people spoke to him, softer, more carefully. The way the household guards treated Robb with more open warmth, and him with quiet respect, like he was a guest in his own home. One evening, after a long day of snowball fights and sword training with Robb and Theon, Jon sat near the fire while Catelyn did her needlework. "Lady Stark," he said carefully. He still didn't call her mother, and she didn't insist. She looked up. "Yes, Jon, am I a bastard?" Catelyn set the needle down, her face unreadable. She had waited for this. Ned had told her. The day would come. They had even rehearsed what she might say. But now that it was real, her heart ached with the weight of it. "No," she said. "You are not." Jon blinked. "Then why don't I carry father's name? Why don't you ever call me your son?" Catelyn sighed. The firelight danced across her face as she knelt beside him. "Because your real name isn't Snow, and your father wasn't my husband." Jon's eyes widened. "Then who?" She held up a hand gently. "What I'm about to tell you must never leave this room. Do you understand, Jon?" He nodded quickly, his young heart thudding in his chest. "You are the son of Lyanna Stark, Ned's sister, and your father was Rhaegar Targaryen." Jon's lips parted in disbelief. The names were like stories from old Nan's tales. Rhaegar, the Dragon Prince, Lyanna, the beautiful Wolf Maid. But the Targaryens were enemies. Father fought them. "Yes," Catelyn said, "but not because of you. Your parents were married in secret. Your mother died giving birth to you, and she made Lord Stark promise to protect you, to keep you safe from those who would kill you simply for your name." Jon sat in silence. The fire crackled softly beside him, but everything inside him felt like it had turned cold. "So, I'm not a Stark," he whispered. "You are," she said firmly. "Your mother was a Stark, and the man who raised you loves you like a son. That makes you as much a Stark as any of us." Tears welled up in his eyes. "Why did he lie?" "To save your life," Catelyn said. "He bore the shame of a lie, to protect you from a truth that could kill you." Jon wiped his face with his sleeve. "So what happens now?" Catelyn gave a small smile, not warm, but real. "Now you grow, you train. You keep this secret until the world is ready for it, if it ever will be. One day, it may fall on you to decide what kind of man you want to be. A Stark, Atargaryen ... or something entirely your own." From then on, Jon changed. He trained harder, read more, watched his siblings with new eyes, not jealous, but grateful. And Catelyn, though she still struggled, found herself watching him with less guardedness. Robb noticed the difference first. One morning, as they rode through the woods together, he asked Jon why he seemed so quiet lately. Jon smiled faintly. Just thinking about who I want to be. Robb smirked. A knight, a ranger, maybe a hero from old Nan's stories. Jon shook his head. Someone better than a name. Meanwhile, in the south, whispers of Targaryen sympathizers stirred again. Ravens flew, spies listened, and the name Snow began to feel like a thread, harmless alone, but dangerous if tugged by the wrong hand. And somewhere far away, a certain spider in King's Landing started asking questions he hadn't asked in years. But Winterfell slept on, guarded not just by walls and swords, but by a secret older than Jon Snow himself. The days in Winterfell moved on like they always had snowfall, swordplay, and duty. But something beneath the stones of the old castle had shifted. Catelyn Stark now carried a truth that kept her awake at night. She watched Jon with sharpened eyes, not out of hatred, but out of fear. Fear for him and for all her children. One mistake, one whispered word, and Robert Baratheon's rage would burn the north to ashes. Robb and Jon grew inseparable. They trained side by side in the yard, wrestled in the snow, and hunted together through the Wolf's Wood. Catelyn saw it happening, the bond, the love, and she knew, if the truth ever came out, that love could become Robb's undoing, or Jon's. Then came the raven from King's Landing. Ned had been summoned by King Robert to serve as Hand of the King. The letter arrived on a stormy morning, sealed with the royal stamp and soaked through from the sleet. Ned read it once, then again he didn't speak for hours. Catelyn understood. Before he even told her, Robert was calling him south, and there would be no polite refusal. The past was stirring. Old wounds were bleeding again. In the quiet of their chambers, she finally asked, "You think he suspects?" Ned shook his head. "No, but I think he's remembering. The war, Lyanna, the ghosts we buried under years of silence." Catelyn paced near the fire. "If you go, what happens if someone finds out about Jon?" Ned turned to her, his face full of tired honesty. "That's why I'm not taking him." Catelyn's breath caught. "You were considering it." "I thought of bringing him as my squire," Ned admitted, "but it's too dangerous. The moment someone sees him and asks the wrong question." She nodded. It made sense, but it didn't stop her heart from twisting. "Promise me something," she said. "If things go badly, if Robert learns the truth, you must not let Jon suffer. He's still a boy, still innocent, I promise." When Ned left for King's Landing, he kissed Robb on the head, told Bran to climb no more, hugged Arya tighter than usual, and when he looked at Jon, their eyes locked for a long, silent moment. Jon had grown tall, lean like his father, but with Lyanna's grey eyes. Ned saw her every time he looked at the boy. It hurt, but it also reminded him why he had chosen to live with dishonor, because Jon's life was worth more than his pride. "Be strong," Ned said, "and trust Lady Stark." Jon nodded, though the words didn't settle easily. But Ned wasn't the only one leaving. Catelyn left soon after, when Bran fell from the tower. She went south to find answers and found something worse instead. Littlefinger, Pettia Baelish, had always been dangerous. But now, in her grief and confusion, Catelyn listened, and Pettia, sharper as ever, noticed something odd during one of their many tense meetings. "Tell me, my lady," he said, sipping his wine slowly, "is Jon Snow truly Ned's?" Catelyn froze. "Why ask that?" "Curiosity," Pettia said, with a smile. "He doesn't quite look like a northern bastard, does he? Not like those tall, pale first men types. There's something dragon-like about him." Her silence gave away more than she intended. Petyr leaned in. "I always thought Eddard too noble for whores," he said softly. "But secrets are now those he carries like armor." "If you value your tongue, Lord Baelish," she said coldly, "you'll never speak of this again." He only smiled wider. "Of course, my lady. Loose tongues are so dangerous in a world built on secrets." Catelyn left King's Landing with a new dread in her heart. She had seen the hunger in Petyr's eyes, not for her, but for power. If he ever pieced together the truth, he wouldn't keep it to himself. He'd weaponize it, use Jon as a pawn, or worse, a target. Back in Winterfell, Jon trained harder than ever. His blade was sharper, his mind clearer. He no longer dreamed of being a knight. He dreamed of purpose, of knowing who he was. And Robb noticed. "You've changed, Snow," he said one night. "By the fire, you carry something. A weight." Jon looked at him. "You'd carry it too if you knew it could kill you." Robb didn't understand, not yet, but someday he would. And when he did, it would change everything. Jon stood on the battlements of Winterfell, watching the snow fall gently over the courtyard. The silence was comforting, but he knew peace like this never lasted. Something inside him had changed since Lord Stark left for King's Landing. The weight of the truth sat heavy in his chest, like a secret blade no one else could see. Robb joined him, rubbing his hands for warmth. "Still up here, brooding?" Jon gave him a half smile. "I like the cold." Robb nodded. "You're more of a Stark than I am, sometimes." The words hit Jon harder than Robb realized. He wasn't sure if it was a compliment or a curse. Back inside the castle, Maester Luwin had received troubling news. Ravens spoke of rising tensions in the south. King Robert was dead. Lord Stark was imprisoned for treason, and the new King Joffrey Baratheon had claimed the throne. When Catelyn returned to Winterfell, her face was pale and her voice was thinner than before. She looked older somehow, worn down by secrets and lies. She gathered her children that evening and delivered the grim news. Sansa broke down. Arya's face went cold. Bran, still broken from his fall, stared ahead silently, and Robb clenched his fists and walked out into the snow without a word. Later that night, Catelyn found Jon in the God's Wood. "I should have told him," Jon said, his voice trembling. "He deserved to know what kind of world he's walking into." "He'll find out soon enough," Catelyn replied. "But not yet. You still have time." Jon looked at her, eyes dark with guilt. "What if I'm the reason something terrible happens?" "You're not," she said firmly. "The world is cruel all on its own. Don't give it more power than it already has." Meanwhile, in King's Landing, things were unraveling quickly. Ned Stark refused to name Joffrey the rightful heir. He had uncovered the truth that the boy was not Robert's son but born of incest between Cersei and Jaime Lannister. But his honor proved his downfall. Littlefinger betrayed him, and whispers began to swirl. The spider, Varys, heard them, so did Pycelle. A few of the old lords still remembered Rhaegar's beauty, and more than one wondered aloud. If Ned Stark had kept a Targaryen child alive, what would that mean now, with Robert gone? Back in Winterfell, things grew colder than usual. Robb was no longer just the heir, he was preparing for war. News of his father's imprisonment had set his blood boiling. He summoned Bannerman, sent ravens, called Theon to his side. Jon watched as Robb became something else stronger, but harder. And one night, Robb came to him with a look in his eyes Jon had never seen before. "I'm marching south," Robb said, "to free father. To bring him home. Jon stood, heart pounding. Then I'll ride with you. But Robb hesitated. You can't. Why not? Because you're not a Stark. The words were sharp. Jon flinched. I didn't mean it like that, Robb added quickly. I mean officially. You're not a Stark. You'd have no claim, no standing in the war councils. If something happened to me, they wouldn't follow you. Jon's jaw tightened. I don't care about standing. I care about father. I know you do, Robb said, his voice softer now. But if you ride with me, people will ask questions. You don't look like a Snow anymore, Jon. You look like someone else. And I don't trust what they'll whisper. Jon realized then just how dangerous his face had become. A symbol, a threat, a story waiting to break open. So he didn't argue. He nodded. I'll stay, he said. But send word when you reach the south. I want to know everything. Robb clasped his shoulder. You'll watch over the family. I always have. As Robb rode out days later with banners high and wolves howling, Jon stood on the walls once again, watching him disappear into the snow-covered horizon. He didn't cry. He didn't blink. But deep down, he wondered if the next raven would bring news of victory, or the end of everything they had tried so hard to protect. And still, in the shadows of the capital, Littlefinger smiled to himself, because he finally had enough pieces to begin a new game. A secret prince, a bastard no more, and the throne. It was never farther than one good lie away. The raven came just before dawn. The sky was still dark, the snow untouched, and the air sharp enough to sting the lungs. Maester Luwin found Jon in the yard, practicing alone with a wooden sword, the rhythm of his strikes steady and quiet. Jon, the old man said, breath heavy, scroll in hand. From the twins, Jon lowered the sword. He already knew. Ravens didn't arrive early unless they carried death. He opened the letter slowly, his eyes scanning the words with shaking hands. When he reached the end, the sword fell from his fingers and hit the stone with a dull thud. Catelyn found him, hours later, sitting at the heart tree in the godswood, silent as the snow. He's dead, isn't he? She asked softly. Jon nodded. Robb Stark, king in the north, murdered at the Red Wedding. Catelyn sank to her knees beside him, but he didn't look at her. They slaughtered him, he said, his men, his wife, his bannermen, all of them. And for what? Because he was brave, because he tried to do the right thing. Catelyn's lips trembled. Her face was hollow. Because he was a Stark. Because we thought honor could shield us from monsters. Jon's knuckles were white with rage. He should have told me. He should have let me fight beside him. If he had, she whispered, you might be dead too. He turned to her now, his voice rough and cracking. Maybe I should be. I have Targaryen blood, don't I? That's what they feared. That's why even my own brother hesitated to trust me. No, she said quickly. He loved you. Robb was trying to protect you. The truth made you dangerous to the wrong people. And now, ... double quotes, she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Now, Robb was gone. Arya lost. Sansa trapped in King's Landing. Bran and Rickon scattered. Ned long buried, and Winterfell. Winterfell was a broken shell, ruled by those who didn't deserve to even step foot in it. Jon stood and paced in the snow. If the Boltons hold the north, and the Lannisters sit the throne, who's left? You, she said, simply. He stopped. No, he shook his head. I'm no one. You're Jon, Catelyn said, standing slowly. you're the son of Lyanna Stark and Rhaegar Targaryen. You are fire and ice. And if the realm knew who you truly were, the game would change. Jon looked at her like he was hearing it all over again. But what does that even mean now? He asked. Everyone I loved is gone. What good is a truth that only brings more death? Catelyn's voice grew firmer. Because lies are what killed your father. Killed Robb. Lies allowed men like Roose, Bolton, and Tywin Lannister to flourish. But the truth could end them. Jon stared up at the trees. The red leaves danced slightly in the wind. What would you have me do? He asked. Survive, she said. And wait. There are still men loyal to your father, to Robb, and when the time comes, you will have something neither of them had clarity. You were raised Stark, but born Targaryen. You understand both the North and the South. You are what this broken kingdom fears most, a leader they can't control. The snow started falling harder. But if I move too soon, Jon said, they'll kill me. Yes, Catelyn said. That's why we won't act yet. She reached into her cloak and pulled out a small cloth bundle, unwrapping it carefully. Inside was a silver pendant shaped like a direwolf Robb's, the last thing of his recovered from the battlefield. Jon took it with shaking hands. Wear it when the time is right, she said. Until then, we say nothing. We mourn. We wait. And we plan. That night, Jon didn't sleep. He stood outside, staring at the stars, wondering if Robb was somewhere beyond them, wondering if Lyanna and Rhaegar watched him too, waiting to see if their son would fulfill a destiny born in war and soaked in blood. And far away, in King's Landing, Lord Varys received a quiet message from the north. One line only. The wolf with the dragon's blood breathed still. Winterfell no longer belonged to the Starks. Jon walked its broken halls months later, after the Boltons had fled and the snows had started to melt. The banners that once flew proudly were gone, replaced by silence and the scent of rot. Ghost padded beside him, low and alert, ears flicking at every echo. Men loyal to the old ways had returned scattered northern houses, small folk, survivors of Robb's war. They did not cheer when Jon arrived. They simply nodded, silently acknowledging him not as a king or a hero but as the last Stark they could still believe in. Catelyn had remained hidden during the battles. Some thought she was dead, lost at the Twins. Others whispered of her ghost, wandering the woods, seeking vengeance. But she had been watching, always from the shadows, making sure Jon survived long enough to claim what was his. Now she stood in the crypts with him, before Ned's tomb. Her eyes were tired, her hands trembling slightly as she placed a direwolf pendant beside the stone. He would have been proud of you, she said quietly. Jon didn't answer. He was staring at Lyanna's statue, eyes locked with the cold stone that bore her name. You should have told them all, he whispered. Years ago, why did you leave the truth buried? Because truth is a blade, Catelyn replied, and the world wasn't ready to be cut. He turned to her. Is it now? She looked at him long and hard. You've bled enough. You've lost more than any boy should. But yes, Jon, it's time. Later that day, they gathered what was left of the Northern Lords Mormont. Reed, Cherwin, Glover. Some arrived out of loyalty, others out of guilt, and a few simply came because they feared the dark tide rising in the south. Jon stood before them, wearing no crown, carrying no great title, just a sword and the weight of the North in his bones. I am Jon Snow, he began, but I was never a Snow. The room stirred. My mother was Lyanna Stark, my father, Rhaegar Targaryen. I was hidden because the realm would have killed me for who I was. My uncle lied to protect me. My brothers died because of the wars built on those lies. He paused. I don't want to be king. I don't want your thrones or your oaths. I only want justice and peace, and to rebuild what was taken from us. Silence. Then a voice rang out. You're still a Stark to me, said Lady Mage. Mormont, another added. We followed Robb because he carried your father's name. We'll follow you because you carry their truth. One by one, heads nodded. Fists were raised. And slowly, a chant grew in the room, quiet but firm. The North remembers. Jon didn't smile. He didn't cry. He only nodded once and walked. Out, the snow melting beneath his feet. But the peace didn't last long. Ravens came from the east. Daenerys Targaryen had landed at Dragonstone. She was marching west with dragons and armies and fire in her blood, and she was looking for allies. She's your aunt, Catelyn told him. You share blood, but be careful. Fire doesn't always burn clean. Jon stared into the hearth that night, watching the flames dance. So many pieces were moving. Cersei still ruled King's Landing with venom and cruelty. The North was free but only for now, and the White Walkers, the true enemy, were no longer just myth. So Jon did what Stark and Targaryen blood both demanded. He rode south not as a conqueror, not as a king, but as a bridge between what was and what could be. When he met Daenerys, she looked at him with both curiosity and calculation. And as he knelt before her not as a servant, but as a man who knew his worth, she asked, "And who are you, really?" Jon met her gaze. "Someone who shouldn't exist," he said, "but I do, and that changes everything." And with those words, the final piece of the game was placed. The boy who was once Jon Snow was gone. In his place stood a truth the world could no longer ignore.